If you're in a medium organization where there's some IT folks and you're just security, but you're a team of one, it might be 30% strategy and 70% technical or tactical. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's episode of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole. It's always a pleasure, honor, and privilege to spend 30 minutes with you going over some thoughts, some concepts, some teaching on what it means to be a Chief Information Security Officer. And I always love getting interaction and questions. And one of the questions I got this week that I want to address briefly, and then I promise I will spend an entire episode on it, but I do have some key things I do want to cover today and finish off our discussion of what is cybersecurity that I started last week, where we went in and we started talking about the risk, and now I want to focus in on the critical data and the CIA component of that. But before we do that, the question is, Eric, I understand what you're saying, that in a medium to large size organization, that a Chief Information Security Officer needs to be strategic. And you need to focus on the strategy and focus on the communication component, and they can't get caught up in the technical day-to-day dealings. But what if I'm an information security officer and it's a smaller organization and that's part of my job? I'm either a team of one or I have one or two people, but I am not supposed to be full-time security officer, and I do need to go in and I do need to help out with patching and hardening and those types of things. What recommendation do you have for me? My recommendation is this: be very deliberate with your time. I want you to step back and say, in a perfect world, what % of my day should I spend on strategy, and what % of my day should I be spending on technical, tactical components, if I'm supposed to wear both hats? Now, if you're in a small organization where your IT, security, and the ISO, it might be strategy might be 5% of each day. Security might be 35% of each day, and IT might be 60%. Right? If you're help desk, if you're doing all those components, that might be the ideal breakdown. If you're in a medium organization where there's some IT folks and you're just security, but you're a team of one, it might be 30% strategy and 70% technical or tactical. And once again, nothing wrong with that, but then I want you to stick with it. If that's really the case, then I want you to make sure, and I'm just using easy 10-hour days, right? Some of us probably work a lot more than that. Some might be a little less, but 10-hour days. That means if we use the second example, 3 hours a day should be spent on strategy, and 7 hours should be spent on technical, tactical. And then schedule that in. Build a solid routine where maybe it's from 8 to 9, you go in and you do your strategy. And then from 9 to 1, you do all the technical. And then 1 to 3, you look back on strategy. And then 3 to 5, you finish up with tactical, putting out any fires that might have come up. And then stick with that schedule. The problem is this: strategy is longer term. If you don't do strategy today, the world's not going to end. You could do it tomorrow. But if you don't put out the fires or do the technical, tactical pieces that are needed today, you could be in a lot of trouble. You could have a lot of issues. You could have a lot of problems. To put it another way, if you ignore strategy for 3 days, I don't think anyone would notice. If you ignore technical support, block traffic, outages, breaches, things we call fires on the technical tactical side for 3 days, that could be problematic. That could cost you your job. And I'll even push it out. If you push it out for 2 weeks, you could probably ignore strategy for 2 weeks and everything would be okay if you planned before and after. But if you don't focus on the technical, tactical things for 2 weeks, there's going to be huge problems, issues, breaches, compromises within your organization. So what I'm trying to show is short-term urgency is always going to drive you to do the technical, tactical pieces. However, and here's where it all comes together. If you don't do strategy for 6 months, you're going to pay. Because that means if you haven't done any strategy work for 6 months, you're doing random, you're just running around, you're putting out fires, and you're never making progress. You're never putting together hardening guides. You're never putting together metrics. You're never doing the things that a mature organization needs, which means you never get off the treadmill. You're going to keep doing the firefighting. Firefighting typically comes about because of a lack of strategy. And if you never give yourself time to build out an effective strategy, you'll always stay in firefight. You see the sort of the catch-22 here. So what you need to do is force yourself to spend time every day doing strategy so you can eventually minimize and reduce the firefighting. And that's why I'm a really big fan on scheduling out the time and making it a non-negotiable. And I often get folks go, but Eric, things are going to come up. There's going to be problems. No. I can tell you right now, if tomorrow you had to take your kid to the doctor at 2:00 tomorrow, I don't care what comes up at work, you're taking your kid 2:00. Or if you get a speeding ticket and you have to go to court, and if you don't go to court at 10 a.m. tomorrow, you would lose your license and not be able to drive. I don't care what happens. You're going to be at court at 10 a.m. tomorrow. That is the same level of importance you need to put on strategy and planning. But we don't. We make it such a low priority item that when things come up and think, oh, Eric, this was super, super critical. I had to deal with it. No, you didn't. If you had your kid's doctor's appointment or you had to go to court, you would have still made those appointments, right? And the world would not have ended. So we got to make sure that we're not shortchanging ourselves on strategy. And now, yes, you could tell yourself, and this is dangerous, that, okay, Eric, I know I planned 2 hours for strategy today, but this is so important. I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then what's going to happen? Tomorrow you do the same thing. I will tell you, the more you break habits, the easier it is to continue to break those habits. I have an obsession, we can call it an obsession, with Haagen-Dazs ice cream. It's probably a very weird love affair that I have with Haagen-Dazs ice cream. I've been known on some nights to eat 2 or 3 pints, I kid you not, in one evening. Yes, I love my Haagen-Dazs, and if you give me cherry vanilla, oh, game on. So I love it. So I would play the same game. I exercise and I have some health goals, and I like to compete in sports. So I have some goals, and I would play that game. You know something? Tomorrow I'm going to start, right? Tomorrow I'm going to start. I'm just going to have a little Haagen-Dazs today. What harm could it do? Or what happened last week, I went 4 days in a row with no ice cream, which is huge for me. And then I said, okay, the 5th day, come on, I should reward myself. What's a little ice cream going to do? And a pint later, right, guess what? My whole habit was blown. So the point is, when we're building habits, repetition is key. And as soon as you make excuses to break the repetition, you have to start over again. You have to start all the way from the beginning. If you've been doing strategy for 10 days in a row, great. You're building that muscle. You skip 2 days and guess what? You're back to the beginning. You now have to start from day one. It's not cumulative. You have to do something, and different people have different numbers. I play the safer number, which is 75. Some people say it's 30, 40, 50. I find if you do something for 75 days straight, it's going to be a habit. But here's the issue. You miss one day, you got to start over again. So if you do planning, strategic planning every day, and for 25 days you do it, and you miss one day, when you come back the next day, that doesn't count as 26. It goes back to 1. And you have to do 75 days straight without missing a day. That's how you build the strategic habit. So that would be my real feedback to you is plan your time, build the habit, and make it a non-negotiable. Don't let anything else get in the way. Make it like it is your kid's doctor's appointment, or you have to go to court, or you have to go visit your parents. Those are non-negotiables. That's what strategic planning needs to be. So if you're not full-time CISO or you're an information security officer, I recognize more of your time might need to be on tactical firefighting. But some of your time every day must be on the strategic side. Otherwise, you're never going to make progress. You're never going to get to the level that you need to be. So I hope that helped you. So now let's jump in to the topic I started last week, and I want to finish up on what is cybersecurity. I know it sounds crazy. If you're a chief information security officer, then your job is cybersecurity. Yet it cracks me up. And right now, be honest with yourself. If I gave you a piece of paper and a pen, and I said you had to write down a 1-sentence definition of cybersecurity, what would you write down? What would you say? I'm amazed of really smart people that work in cybersecurity don't know the answer to this. And the answer is quite simple. It's cybersecurity is understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. That's what it comes down to. So now, last week we covered risk. We covered risk as the probability of loss. We went into details on that. So listen to last week's episode and we'll cover all of that. But what I want to cover on this one are the other two pieces: the critical data and the disclosure, alteration, or denial of access. Everything we do in cybersecurity is all about controlling access to critical data. Critical data is what the attacker wants. If somebody breaks in to a bank and doesn't steal any money, you call that an unsuccessful robbery, right? If somebody breaks into a bank to steal a stapler and leaves, right, the owner of the bank is going to be real happy, right? That's not a successful robbery. The impact of the robbery is in direct proportion to how much money the robber stole. Once again, if they steal $5, that's going to be low impact. If they steal $500,000, that's much, much bigger impact. So it's all directly proportional. The impact of the robbery is directly proportional to the amount of money that was taken. Data is the currency in cybersecurity. So if somebody breaks in to your organization and they don't steal, modify, or destroy any critical data, they have no impact to your critical data and the business processes, we would call that an unsuccessful attack or a very minor breach. What makes something go from minor to major in terms of cybersecurity breaches is the amount of data that's compromised, the amount of information that the attacker takes. Therefore, it's critical that we become obsessed with controlling and managing access to our critical data and critical information. Now, here's the problem. If I go in and ask my fundamental questions about data, what is your critical data? Where is it located? And who has access to it? Most of my clients would be able to go in and tell me, this is the critical data, and here's where it's stored. And they're partially correct. They're going to tell me that the data is stored on 3 servers. And it is. But it's also on 4 other servers they're not aware of. And that's the problem. We know some of the locations where our data is located, but not all of the locations. And the biggest culprit for this is what I like to refer to as portable servers. Now, you might not recognize the term portable servers, so I'll use the term that you're more likely associated with. Laptops. Right? To me, a laptop today is a portable server. The laptops that I carry around have 4 CPUs, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and 4 terabyte hard drive. If you go back even 10 years ago, that is a portable server. That's a pretty high-end system. And if you have 10,000 employees, you have 10,000 times each one has a 4 terabyte hard drive. That's a lot of data. And we recently went in and did a survey, and we found out that most people's hard drives are 90% full. That's a lot of data. So you go in and you recognize this year with the epidemic that hit, most companies opened up a significant number of new offices that all have large hard drives with uncontrolled data. Now I want to pause because I know I said that at a recent keynote and everyone in the audience had this look going, Eric, have you been following? With the COVID, we actually shut down offices. We closed offices. We didn't open up any new offices. And I said, yes, you did. I said March, April, May timeframe. Didn't you go in and have all your employees start working from home? And they said, well, yes. Well, isn't each one of those employees' homes technically a remote office? Because that's where they're working out of. And then the light goes on. If you have 10,000 employees, and earlier this year, you allowed 10,000 employees to work from home, whether you realize it or not, you opened up 10,000 remote offices. Every single home is now a remote office that has access to your data, controls your data, or manages your data. So that is a problem. Because at least pre-COVID, when people worked in the office, you can control and manage what comes in, what leaves, and do inventory of devices that are on the network. Now that they're working at their home office, remote offices, there's not only very little architectural infrastructure that you put in place, but you probably don't even have access to scan, verify, or validate what's on those various devices. So this has taken the whole problem of data management and have made it even worse and even more significant. So the solution is location agnostic, which I've putting together, and I think it was 2 or 3 Life of a CISO episodes. So go ahead and look it up. I think it was episode 19 or 20, where I talked about the architecture of the future. And essentially what it comes down to, it's keenly focused on controlling and managing data. So the way, to me, the architecture really of today, but companies are behind, that we're going to be seeing most organizations utilizing, is you're going to have all of your data centrally controlled and managed in the cloud. Whether it's private cloud, hybrid cloud, you're going to have it all managed because it needs to be accessible from the internet to support remote offices. Having servers on-prem that you can only access when you're in the office is sort of problematic when no one's in the office, right? That doesn't work, right? So we need that new solution. So that's going to be sort of what I call that one tier. Then we have an authentication tier where we're going to do our robust authentication, where we have not only 2-factor authentication, but we're also going to have certificate and location-based authentication. To me, don't look at opportunities as bad, look at them as good. To me, the COVID represents an opportunity. It represents an opportunity for us to redo security correctly. It opens up an opportunity for us to better control and manage the endpoint. To me, the big opportunities of COVID is most people are not traveling, so we don't have to deal with remote traveling laptops. And most people are coming from a fixed set location for all of their access. So why not use that to our benefit and throw on, in addition to two-factor, we throw in some location authentication based on IP addresses and some certificates. Now, once again, to be a great security professional, to be world-class, you always have to look big picture. To me, good security people are always finding fault. Great world-class security people are always putting it in perspective, saying big picture. Because I threw this out once and I had somebody in the Q&A portion of my keynote go, but Eric, you know that IP addresses can be spoofed. You know that it can be spoofed. So I'm surprised that you would. And I'm like, stop. I said, come on, man. I said, first, I'm not recommending that we only authenticate on IP addresses. And you and me both know all the issues with that. But let's be reasonable. If I'm doing two-factor with certificates and people are not traveling and always coming from the same location, better or worse, by adding in a component where we validate and check the IP address, and if it changes, we just go in and we do a check and an extra tier of authentication, better or worse? I think we could all agree it's better. It absolutely is better. So let's make sure that we're working together to improve security and make it as good as we can, and not just sit there and try to criticize or find fault with measures that we know are not perfect solutions. But once again, like the eye doctor, better or worse, better or worse. That's how I do security. I come up with your general prescription that's pretty good. That's your two-factor authentication. And then I want to do slight adjustments, better or worse, better or worse, better or worse. That's all we're doing here. Very slight tuning, but why not make your eyesight as best as possible? Why not make your security as best as possible? And then the final component, the third critical piece, is now your endpoint that's traditionally that portable server, that's that fat client, now becomes a thin client. Essentially, we crank up the memory and we go in and either remove the hard drive, or if you are in a location where you don't have high-speed internet, which I know very few places that do, you can put a small hard drive for caching purposes. But then the concept is this. Every time you turn on your computer in the morning, it goes out, it authenticates, it validates, and it pulls down an operating system that verifies the integrity, and it loads it in memory. And it runs that operating system for the entire day. Then at the end of the day, when you turn off your computer, that entire operating system and anything you did goes away. It's volatile memory. And tomorrow you get a brand new operating system. Now let's break this down, because this solves so many problems. First problem, when you have all these endpoints at remote offices, patching and updating can be difficult because you might not have direct access to those systems. Users might not click on the buttons they're supposed to. But if now every day you get a brand new operating system, we can just patch whenever we want, and then tomorrow you get the brand new update. So if 3 patches come out today, I update it, tomorrow everyone gets the new patch. And same thing with updated configurations or applications. So now it makes the management, application, and patching much more straightforward and consistent. Second, with traditional fat clients, your operating system didn't get rebuilt for 3 or 4 years. If you had your laptop for 4 years, the operating system was built on day one and stayed the exact same for 4 years, which means if I clicked on a link or opened an attachment and I got infected a year in, that laptop stayed infected for 3 years. Now we had a major problem on our hand. With our solution, if you click on a link or open an attachment at 3 p.m. and you stop working at 5, you're now infected for 2 hours, not 2 years. So we're greatly reducing the attack surface and minimizing that exposure. And then finally, all your data now has to be centrally stored and managed. We're not storing 4 terabytes of data locally that's unmanaged, uncontrolled, and exposed. So once again, now, if a user clicks on a link or opens an attachment and gets infected, it's only 2 hours, not 2 years. And if they get hit with ransomware, there's nothing local. There is no local data. And if they get hit with ransomware, all they do is shut off, the ransomware goes away, and they start back up and get a brand new operating system. So to me, we've always known thin clients as a great solution, but bandwidth and traveling has always made it less than optimal. But now that almost everybody has bandwidth, high bandwidth at their home, and very few people are traveling, and even if they are, you can do a cached hard drive image for that. This now becomes a prime opportunity for controlling and managing our data. So when you're planning out for 2021, you need to work with your IT department, because if they're planning on purchasing 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 new laptops with 4 terabyte hard drives, you need to throw the challenge flag on that one. You need to be like, whoa, this isn't where we're going, right? Let's rethink our strategy. And most importantly, as a CISO, don't let a few troublemakers get in the way of success. I've had a few clients that I work with, and they go in and they're pushing this out, and the CIO or somebody with IT within the organization says, let's get a consensus. Let's go in and start asking people, when did IT and security become a democracy? Right? That's crazy. So we get in this room, and you have one person that wants to keep his job, likes things the way they are, and doesn't like change. So do you think he's really going to like this solution? No. And then I had another person on the security team that was a control freak, and they like to control and manage everything and all solutions. And because they didn't come up with the idea, meant it was a bad idea, right? And the whole thing sort of fell apart and disastrous. So, and this was even before COVID. We predicted that location agnostic was important. So this was over a year ago. And then I get a call a couple months ago with like, yeah, Eric, we should have listened to you. We should have put it in place. We had infections. We had problems. We had issues. And now they're starting to roll it out after the fact. So yes, it's good to ask opinions and make sure you're making an accurate decision. But don't let people that have alternative agendas get in the way of what's best for the organization. Make sure that you're focused on success. And trust me, this general 3-tier of having all your critical data and applications in private hybrid clouds, authentication tier that's robust and solid, and thin clients, this is going to be a solution that not only meets the short-term needs of the COVID, but also the long-term needs of being location agnostic across the organization. So that's our second piece of security. We talked about risk last week. We talked about data. The last piece is what we call the CIA Triad. Security is really 3 things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And the definitions are: confidentiality is prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized disclosure of information. Integrity is prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized alteration of information. And availability is prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized denial of access. That's why in my definition I say that cybersecurity is about understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of our critical data being disclosed, confidentiality, altered integrity, or denied access availability. So CIA is the goals, and what we're trying to prevent or minimize is disclosure, alteration, and denial of access. So they go together. Now, the problem is most people and most organizations, when we go in and we ask about security, if I just went out on the street and I just started asking people, what is your definition of cybersecurity? 95% of them, and yes, I've done this, 95% of them would put confidentiality in their definition. Oh, it's making sure that our secrets are secret. It's making sure that somebody can't steal my information, make sure somebody can't steal my money, make sure somebody can't take, steal, blah, blah, blah. Everyone always focuses on the disclosure, the confidentiality. That is important. But for your organization, you need to understand which is the 3 is most important. I would argue that going into the holiday season, especially with the COVID, where many people are still not shopping or going to stores, that the most important thing for an e-commerce vendor is going to be availability. I will tell you right now, if Amazon.com, if they have some data disclosed, some credit cards disclosed, they're going to survive. If they even have a few prices or a few things altered, they're going to survive. But if you type in www.amazon.com and you get site not available or site doesn't exist and you can't access their site, the entire site is unavailable, they could go out of business very, very quickly because people have low tolerance. Most people, if they type Amazon.com and it doesn't come up, they might wait 5 minutes, try again, but if it's obvious the site is down, what are they going to be going in? They're going to be going in, oh, I need some tools for the holiday. I can't get to Amazon. I'm going to HomeDepot.com or Lowe's.com. I need some toys for the kids. I'm going to Target.com. And they're going to go in and give up on that very, very quickly. And if you understand the transactional flow of e-commerce, that could be a significant amount of money in a very short period of time. So I can guarantee you e-commerce sites right now in December, yes, they're thinking about disclosure and alteration, but they are obsessed with denial of access or availability. So you need to understand for your organization which is most important. And here's critical. Make sure you're aligned with the executives. So one of the exercises I want you to do is you sit down with your executives with a pie chart, a circle, and you ask them what percent of our security should be on confidentiality, integrity, availability. These are very high-level terms. They understand what they mean. Now, most execs are going to say all three are important. So great. Make it 3, 33, 33, 33. So if all three are important, and then you look at that. And most of them will say, well, no, let's move this, move this, move this. If your organization decides that 20% of security should be on confidentiality, 30% should be on integrity, and 50% should be on availability, you better make sure that your security is aligned with that. When I see organizations that spend a lot of money and they still get breached and they still get compromised, it's usually because of a misalignment of the allocation of the CIA Triad for the company is not aligned with where they're spending the money. You want to make sure those two circles are aligned and that you're addressing the high priority items for organizations, because I would argue every organization needs to focus on all three. It's just the percents are different. So now that you understand the definition of security, you now have some work and some exercises you can do. I hope you found this episode valuable. If you'd like any other topics for me to cover, please either post a comment below or email me at ecole@secure-anchor.com. And thank you for joining me. And thank you for helping me make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family.